sustainable it's a funny word. It's one you have to use, because if you think about, well, I don't care about sustainability. Well, what's the opposite of sustainability? Unsustainability. Okay, so that means it's not going to last.
Yeah.
So the only way for something to truly be sustainable is it has to be financially sustainable. Otherwise, you can't keep it at the doors open. It has to be environmentally sustainable. Otherwise, you're just going to degrade whatever you have. It has to be sustainable in your community involvement, right? How you interact with the community has to be sustainable. Otherwise, they're going to change the regulations, you get booted out. And so you really have to think about all this holistically. And we talked a little bit already about it's after the heights of COVID, now it's become more of a gold rush. Gold rushes, if done poorly, can just absolutely trash the industry and trash everything about it. And that would be a shame, right? If like this 5-year period, everybody just extracts all the value, runs it, and then everybody said, forget this, we're banning it. We're not going to do this stuff anymore. This is terrible. But we have the opportunity to think about things very differently.
You're listening to Slick Talk, the hospitality podcast, a podcast for those who are in and around the hospitality industry who love, live, and breathe what they do. You can join us for candid and unscripted conversations with hospitality experts and founders as we go deeper into their personal stories while they're sharing their triumphs and trials that got them to where they are today. I'm your host, Will Slickers, and you're listening to an episode of Slick Talk, the hospitality podcast. Now, let's begin. All right, everybody. Welcome back to another episode of Slick Talk, the hospitality podcast. And man, it's a beautiful day here in Cancun, Mexico, but it's an even better day because I get to sit down and chat and interview my friend Andrew McConnell from Rented. So welcome back to the show, my friend. How are you doing?
I'm doing great. It'd be better if I was down in Cancun with you and doing this in person.
Cancun, Bermuda, not bad locations to be doing a podcast from.
That is true.
Yeah, we got it pretty rough over here. No, but super excited for this episode. It's one that I've been looking forward to. And just to give the audience some backstory, maybe you're a new listener, maybe you're a longtime listener, but never listened to the first episode. But you were on the show June 3rd. We just looked it up, June 3rd, 2020. So in the middle of the dumpster fire of COVID, or not the middle, the beginning of it. And and now we're back on the episode discussing everything that's happened since, but then also going into a lot of what you guys have done at Rented, what you're doing personally, and kind of maybe even going into the story of getting to meet you in person at Live Res, which was super such a big highlight for me. So yeah, what's new? How have you been? Let's jump into it.
Yeah, a lot new on personal and business, on professional outside of business, a lot going on. So I think since June, you referenced it briefly, in September of 2020, we came out to Bermuda, kind of like you're doing with Cancun, right? Work remotely for a month, see how it works. And now we're in year 2, and my daughter's enrolled in school out here for her second year. And it's just made us rethink a lot of life, right? Like our material quality of life is very different than it would be in the US. I drive a 2007 very rusted car that may or may not leak oil. But I would say the overall quality of life is fantastic. So the personal front, professional front, man, when we caught up, if it was published June 3rd, like we can say it was before DeSantis reopened the markets in Florida. So when we spoke, we were hoping things would turn around come summer 2020, but no one was sure. And if we had lost that summer, it's hard to get back into that space. But I think a lot of people, if they had to rewind, if you're in the Gulf Coast, if you're the Southeast, and you lost that entire summer, the last 2 years would have looked very, very different. Instead, fortunately, it was gangbusters, right? 72 hours before Memorial Day, the governor opens the Florida beaches, and basically people have not stopped booking since. And to be fair, like William Gibson said, the future is here. It's just not evenly distributed. The gold rush is here. It's just not evenly distributed. Early on, certainly drive-to markets, Hawaii was not benefiting from that. European markets definitely were not benefiting from it, had a lot more domestic travel, so that picked up. But really, just it's been astounding to see for clients. We had our weekly stand up, and we talk about different clients we serve and celebrating wins. And there's one that has 6x'd their revenue in the past year. Not 2 years, past year. They came on about 12 months ago, and they've 6x'd.
Wow.
And part of that is doubling the revenue they generate each property. Part of that, they've 3x the properties. They started from 22 to 66 now. But it's unreal, right? You think back when we were speaking April, May, nobody's allowed to travel. Everybody's scared of everything.
Well, we all lost business in some way or form. Like we were like, how are we going to recover? I know I was in that position. A lot of companies that were doing big spending on marketing and growth for the plan of 2020, because we're right, it's the roaring 20s. We were all excited. It was dead.
Yeah, I mean, it was tough for us. So we serve professional property managers, and you see their business dry up. We had clients in the Caymans that the airport was closed. They had zero business. And saying, okay, look, if our customers don't make it, if our clients don't make it, then we're never going to make it. How do we get in this with them? And so we just, without anybody asking, cut everybody's prices in half. Say, hey, we're gonna take a gamble. Until June, everybody's prices are cut in half. And fortunately, things picked back up in June. People stayed on, paid full price come June. That was hard, right? The entire executive team took huge pay cuts to float that.
Yeah.
But it was so worth it. I mean, a client came back and said, look, a lot of people said, hey, we're all in this together. We're all in this together. You're the only people that didn't just say it. You actually were in it with us, did something to show us you were in it with us. And that really gets back to so much of words are relatively cheap. It's the actions.
100%.
And, we can talk about the walk in Boise, but right, ideas are good, right? You need a great idea, but then you need that execution. And, it's been so gratifying to see you take this idea. It was this great idea. It was this time, it was coalescing, and then just go all in on it and see Hospitality FM really come together. I love when a great idea meets a great founder that has that passion and that execution ability.
Well, I was going to say, to give the listeners some context, I don't know, I don't share much personally. Like, it's more like I just love interviewing great founders like yourself and everyone who's been on the show before and coming up. And it's a way for me to learn. This is my outlet of I want, we have that access. I think the biggest thing a podcast is giving me is access to people that just super inspiring, and some that you wouldn't think would, some that are just obviously out there, and you get them on the show and you just get like, oh, all right, this is great. But seeing the opportunity of the in-person events come back, it was my biggest thing thinking about conferences, VRMA, Live Res, and I think I did one more or did something in person. It's kind of a blur that whole month, but this was like the idea of, okay, we're solidifying the relationships and the friendships and everything that's happened the last 2 years with these in-person events. Like, this is the opportunity that there's no walls, there's no barrier, there's no virtual reality of you look great on screen, but you're kind of all that stuff is going away. And just going out into that conference season just with that mindset was so helpful, just because meeting people like you, it just opened up so many conversations and let that ability to be transparent. And so for the listeners, when I think we both got to Live Res a day or two early.
Yeah.
And so we were in Boise, Idaho, and it was like, hey, let's meet up. You were on the podcast. I considered us some good friends on LinkedIn and all that good stuff. So, let's hang out, let's meet up and grab coffee or something. And getting to have the opportunity to meet up in person, shake your hand, just look at you as a man and just be like, all right, like this is legit. Like, you're a real guy. That's the one biggest fear as a podcaster. You're like, are these people real? Sometimes you never know. But then getting to just pick your brain on an unrecorded level. And that's the time I kind of joke with other people in the industry. Like, I wish I had a microphone 24/7 just to be like capturing those moments, but those moments are so good because they're unscripted, they're uncaptured. And I think getting to pick your brain, just getting to see the the stuff that you're going through as you're writing a book, as you are you've pivoted your business. And I wanted to ask you that question of like, did you guys launch art in the middle of COVID, or like when did you guys pivot that? Because anyways, that's kind of off the path, but anyways, our conversation, that was I've had that idea of Hospitality FM. I wanted your feedback because a lot of the audience that we serve with Slick Talk is founders and people that are movers, right? Like they love to make and break things in a good way. And so getting to hear your feedback was so good. And just I think you said to me literally, just go for it, just try it, see what happens, see what happens with the market and how you can need to change things, or were you spot on? That was some of the best advice. And so I just walked away from that conference and that whole season of the year just super energized, and couldn't thank you enough for the time. It was a great opportunity to go.
Yeah, I mean, you haven't slowed down since, right? Like it's been cranking. It's really been remarkable and amazing to see.
Yeah.
You referenced ART, which is Rened's automated rate tool, and kind of how that came about. And it's in 2020, we had revenue management as a full service business. So our team, we still have a team of managers with decades of revenue management experience that have been vacation rental managers and revenue managers. And so we were managing these properties on behalf of third-party clients. And our team kept saying, hey, we kind of need this, or this would make it so much faster. Oh, if an algorithm took into account this better, et cetera. And so, we were in a market at that time that a lot of people were cutting. And back to just kind of betting on yourself and gambling, we said, no, actually, we're going to invest. We think there's a real opportunity to build something better here, a better rate tool for professional vacation rental managers. And we hired the former CTO from Vacasa. We said, look, if the biggest company in the space built all this for themselves, what if we can build something even better for the 97% of management companies that manage fewer than 1,000 properties? What if we can give them access to the best of the best when it comes to technology and pricing and revenue management? And so we invested and built that out and brought that to market in 2021. And I mean, the results are astounding. Like I talked, that client that in those 12 months has 6x revenue. We have a client that's kind of a consultant, and she works across multiple accounts, and very experienced revenue manager, right? Ran large teams at a company that got acquired by Vacasa.
Yeah.
And she had a bake-off, like, hey, let me do some on art, let me do some outside art. And she said, within the first week, you're bringing in 22% more in revenue. And this is not somebody who was just hands off doing nothing. This is somebody that's like, I know what I'm doing, and still it's able to do this. And so it's just been incredible to see what we can deliver for managers, because you're in this industry that it doubles basically every 8 to 10 years, right? It was 40 billion in 99, it was 80 billion in 2009, closer to 160 by 2019, and then now picked up again. But almost all that growth is from demand, right? If you look at supply is not growing that fast. A lot of people during COVID actually took supply offline. They said, no, I want to go be able to stay in my home outside the city. I'm going to move there full time. A lot of people bought it and said, this is where we're going to live. So,
or with that real estate boom, people were selling their homes for crazy numbers, just nuts.
They were selling it, and the people buying it,
Yeah.
like somebody who can afford that price, are like, I don't need to rent. I'm so rich. I don't want to this is for me. And so you have surging demand and stagnant or decreasing supply. And if you remember Economics 101, that means you have absurd pricing power.
Yeah.
And most people aren't well situated to spend the time they need to have the big data they need to have access to have the real-time updating technology they need to take full advantage of that. And so that's really what we built out and brought out to market. And it's 96,000% growth over the last 12 months since we launched. So it's people are really seeing the benefit, and it's been pretty exciting to see.
Yeah. Well, I told you earlier on, I listened to our first episode from 2020, and there was a thing you said, we have the opportunity, because rented, when you were doing the full service model, just, humans doing their thing, right? They decades and decades of revenue management experience. I asked you some questions about, hotel revenue management and the applications from that to vacation rentals with such a scattered inventory count and all this other stuff. And then you said, we have great people, but we have the best technology on the back end. So I'm kind of curious, was that best technology in the back end kind of the foundation of what art has become for the public?
Yeah, that's exactly right. So we built it initially for our team,
Mm-hmm.
and they were saying, okay, we need to take this to market. So initially it was you had to have full service from us. So you had to have the person and the technology. And we ended up decided to make it more B2C. So not just, hey, you need to be this power user to be able to do it, but this super intuitive, lightning fast tool, to the extent that when somebody who runs a very large property management software company saw it the first time, said, "Oh wow, this is what a pricing tool built by revenue managers looks like," right? Like this is how you would want it if this is what you do for a living. And so it really was saying, okay, instead of us being the only users, are there other people that would benefit from this? And yeah, there were a lot of people that didn't want to hand the reins over to someone else to do it, say, I want to take control of this, but I want better tools to do it myself. And so that is what we ended up doing.
That's super cool. And I'm seeing kind of a pattern, and maybe you can give some like insight on this and just like the thinking behind it, because we're seeing a lot of even property management companies that had, a tech stack that they've, had outsourced, whether it was Breezeway and they had this and they had that and they had, some property management software. But then they were like, hey, well, we need this. Okay, we're going to build it and connect it. Well, we need this too. So we're going to build it and connect it. And then eventually they've built their whole own tech stack. And not knowing it, they're like, our team just needed it. So we built it. And then we realized, like, why not have the complete package of every piece that a property management company like us could need? Do you think that's going to be a common theme, or is that just, we have a couple that did it right and they just realized, why not use this investment that we invested in ourselves for the industry? Or is there maybe just it's more of a hype?
Yeah, I don't think there's a blanket rule there. I mean, the best new products, the best new businesses, solutions are things you built to solve a real problem. And it's a real problem if you have it. So if they build something for themselves, chances are that applies to someone else. Now, the tough thing you run into with vacation rental management and alternative accommodations is it is so fragmented. People do it so differently, which is why there are 50 different property management software providers. There are multiple different pricing companies. There are multiple of every single thing we have. There are multiple, because it's not cookie cutter. It's not big box. It's not only are the properties different, but the markets are different and the regulations are different and how owners' expectations work are different. And so I do think there are going to be times, and it's going to continue to happen, where there are gaps, right? Hey, look, there's nobody actually addressing this in a really, really good way. And so we need to solve this problem. Maybe we have access to an offshore dev team, or I have a tech background, I can connect with this person and go invest. And that's how a lot of it, that's how I think LiveRes was initially built, and all these other things were partnered with a manager saying, hey, let's build this out together and solve this real problem for you. Oh, let's see if this applies to other people. And I think that regardless of the industry is going to continue to happen. I think what you just bump into is this question of how big the market for any one of those things is, because it can be so tailored to just how you do things.
Yeah.
And so that would be my cautionary recommendation there.
For sure. And not to quote a friend of ours, but David Jacoby from Hostfully, he's always said, you can look under the hood of operation team with a hotel, and most likely you see the same thing under the hood of a different operation team of a hotel, right? But when it comes to vacation rentals, you can't really look under the hood and expect to see the same thing of every company, because it's 100%. So different. So that's a really good point. One thing personally I want to know, kind of just, from a founder's perspective, you guys have, you went from the full service model to art, and then you've grown that to exponential numbers. And you obviously get to see a lot of data. You get to see and hear from a lot of customers. You get to see and work with a lot of partners in the industry. So what is something right now within, the heights of COVID to the recovery to the future, what are some things that are really getting you personally excited within something new, something that isn't covered in maybe the typical blog article or the typical LinkedIn post that we always see with trends and things like that, but what's something that's just getting you excited from what you've kind of seen on the back end?
Yeah, and maybe this is the kind of thing you're looking for or not, but one in particular. So let me just, if it's okay, tell a little story about when I first got in the industry. Really, what got me very excited about this industry and the potential for this industry, and that was reading a statistic from Focusrite that at the time there were roughly 6 billion hotel bed nights available globally over the course of a year. And if you did the math on the equivalent bedrooms going unused on second homes, investment properties, et cetera, the number at that time was 7.2 billion. So you look at that and you say, okay, we never had to build those hotels. We had everything we needed here. We had these assets already sitting there not being used. We didn't have to cut down those trees and get all that carbon out, making that concrete and dig up all that metal and destroy our environment to build these new buildings. We could just use the things we already have better. And I do think this industry can and will and should be a real force for change and for good in travel and thus in the world, with as big of a part of GDP and growing that travel is. It's growing at 2x the rate of GDP. And you have Bob Garner and others really leading the charge on, and I saw you all signed up for it with the Book Direct show and everything, on how do we think more sustainably as an industry? What can we do as an industry to drive this change for better? And I think sustainable it's a funny word. It's one you have to use, because if you think about, well, I don't care about sustainability. Well, what's the opposite of sustainability? Unsustainability. Okay, so that means it's not going to last.
Yeah.
So the only way for something to truly be sustainable is it has to be financially sustainable. Otherwise, you can't keep it the doors open. It has to be environmentally sustainable. Otherwise, you're just going to degrade whatever you have. It has to be sustainable in your community involvement, right? How you interact with the community has to be sustainable. Otherwise, you're going to change the regulations, you get booted out. And so you really have to think about all this holistically. And we talked a little bit already about it's after the heights of COVID, now it's become more of a gold rush. Gold rushes, if done poorly, can just absolutely trash the industry and trash everything about it. And that would be a shame, right? If like this 5-year period, everybody just extracts all the value, runs it, and then everybody said, forget this, we're banning it. We're not going to do this stuff anymore. This is terrible. But we have the opportunity to think about things very differently. Yeah. And it's great to see more and more people doing that, caring about it, and driving the industry towards that.
For sure. No, I couldn't agree more. And that's why, companies like Rent Responsibly and, things that Bob Gardner is doing, because we have tons of conferences in vacation rentals alone. It's not even touching the service of hotel ones, but, we have so many conferences where people travel internationally for. So being more sustainable in that aspect too is really important. And, guest amenities and the way we're servicing, hospitality, right? Yeah. Super important.
I mean, you bring up, sorry.
I'll go for it.
Rent Responsible. I mean, because it is that holistic, right? Like you have Simon Lehman and AJ Atelier really pushing, look, it's about profitability. You need to be financially responsible and sustainable. You need to be community responsible, like Rent Responsibly, and contribute and do what you can to engage in your local community. You need to be environmentally responsible and sustainable. And it really is this whole package coming together.
100%. And the common word is responsible, and like immediately that for me, like as a millennial, I think I'm a millennial, but goes like, it's a lot of work. Local, responsible for local, responsible for global, responsible for this, like, and profitability. Like there's so many things, and so it's always funny because when it comes to this, you kind of keep mentioning the gold rush, is that I'm a active consumer of TikTok, right? So I would like to see what are younger generations doing, because there's such a big awakening, I think, from COVID, that people were just hating school or hating their job or hating living in their hometown and just wanted something new, and then they find something that they love, right?
Mm-hmm.
So then you see a lot of this stories on TikTok, and I just kind of like to see what's going on in that. And actually, not even kidding, like probably I think it was the last night or the night before, I allowed myself a little bit of social media time, and I was scrolling through and I'm seeing people talking about how they prevent parties at their Airbnb, or how they prevent this, and they're showing products like Noise Aware, or they're, saying, what's my technology, what do I use for my vacation rental homes, and they put like a number, like 10 homes. Then you see like logos like Guesty and a few other things flash, and I'm like, interesting, like people that have never touched hotels, restaurants in the sense of operations or working it are now already like embracing this like gold rush mentality of like going into getting active services or tools in the space. And it's pretty interesting to see the amount of up and coming or new managers that they don't know what a property management software is, but they do know what a Noiseware, a Minute Device, or whatever that common that I've seen, some pricing tools being quoted and used. And so it's like, okay, interesting, like this, and they have no idea about what's going on in this internal sphere that we get to see. And they're just kind of running with it, right? They're running with Airbnb. They're running with this, Turo. If you've seen Turo, so like they're running with this like Airbnb Turo combo, and it's super fascinating. But I think it kind of, to touch on the point of sustainability, it's operators like those that are, hopefully can prevent some speed bumps and some forks in the road along the way by getting introduced to things like rent responsibly and understanding just fair regulation and operations, and what this looks like. It's not just a $1 million a year revenue type, coaching business or business to franchise out. It's a legit thing to think about for long terms coming, not just, making $1 million this year and then going out of business the next.
Right.
So it's always something I like to kind of touch on with that, because I see a lot of it. I see a lot of people like, oh, I can teach you how to make $1 million on Airbnb, and you're like, okay, but can you do it profitably?
Can you do it? Yeah.
Can you do it responsibly as well?
3 years running.
Yeah, seriously. Well, we got to touch on some exciting stuff again from that talk in Boise, and you mentioned, and I saw on Facebook and LinkedIn, which I also pre-ordered, but your book. So I want to talk about the process of writing a book. What is the book about, and more or less like there's moments, right? I think you and I both talked about this in the first podcast. There's moments in life that inspire certain things, and I want to kind of know what those moments are with you with the book. So let's talk about that.
So it was actually a second book. So the first book was, I write basically monthly for Forbes, and I was thinking, I write these each month. A book is the accumulation of multiple writings. Like, could I write a book? And the original thought was the startup stoic, and it was the entrepreneurial journey, very much like our conversation in Boise, taking that walk and pulling from quotes from Stoicism on having that first idea, getting the courage to quit your job and go all in, hiring your first employee, and going all the way through to shutting the doors or selling the company, and just telling personal stories as well as from others through that. And so I got a book agent with that book. And the book agent said, look, you can write. This is actually good, but the audience is very small. People who care about Stoicism, people who are starting companies, like it's smaller. I think you have a bigger idea. So keep thinking about it. And I had a conversation it was like March, when everything was shutting down. I was just calling a bunch of friends, right? Like you feel so isolated, you're not out seeing people, you're not getting to the office. So I was calling a bunch of friends from college. And this was a friend that had done a bunch of big stuff in real estate, like bought tens of thousands of properties for single family rentals, launched a big VC fund. And we were talking about renting. And he said, I think we're going to end up with a generation of renters because, our class, when we got out of college, the market was falling off a cliff. It was after the Iraq invasion. If you look at a curve of the stock market, it just fell off a cliff. Then you kind of work and you go to grad school and you're coming out and the financial crisis hits. And then you're like, and you're starting to stabilize your career, and COVID hits and the world falls apart. Like these people, they're never going to be able to afford real estate. And that really stuck with me. I was thinking about it. And then I was watching around me. I was watching myself going on Johns Hopkins site and scrolling and looking at the updates on the case count for COVID, and other people on News Cycle, and the president tweeting every 5 minutes or whatever was going on. And I said, actually, The bigger problem we have is that we have a entire society of mind renters, right? The only real estate we actually can own and do own from birth all the way to the end is our mind. This is our body. This virus can get in it. A car could hit us. We can get sick, hurt, injured. Any possession can be taken away. Anything can happen. But our mind is the only thing we carry with us for our life that we can truly control. And yet we spend so much of our lives just giving it away, right? Giving it away to what some jerk said and thinking about that for hours afterwards, or being so scared about what might come next week or next day.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's what the book ended up being about. So it's called Get Out of My Head, Creating Modern Clarity Using Stoic Wisdom. Mm-hmm. And it takes this premise of mental real estate and mind tenancy and gets into the science behind, hey, here's why the brain works this way, right? Like, here's how human brains evolved, and then here's why this is a problem. And then gets into why, in a lot of ways, it's getting worse in modern society with a lot of the stuff going on, and how to solve it. So with going back to some Stoicism and principles, but then illustrating it with some friends of mine, the founder of DocuSign, someone who ran a team in Navy SEALs, Olympians, artists, entrepreneurs, just people from all different aspects of life who've taken these principles and put them into practice. And then each chapter closes with, okay, now here's an exercise, here's a worksheet to now really go put this into practice. Don't just read this and go to the next one. Like, work through this. This is something that can serve you for the rest of your life if you own your most important asset, which is your mind.
Yeah.
And so that's the book.
That's super cool. And it's like a perfect, I wouldn't say storm, but yeah, it's like a perfect storm, because like for me, like coming to Mexico, I felt super unproductive the last month, not in Mexico, but before coming here. I was just like, something was going on. And then getting here, going into a more minimalist life where I got a suitcase full of clothes. I have my little microphone that's not my normal like studio setup, basic amenities inside the apartment. But then just realizing, a lot of things taking my space in my mind was social media. So not like TikTok, and that's more of like a me kind of just, I try to balance I try to balance consuming and producing. So a lot of producing is on LinkedIn, Facebook, Instagram, stuff like that. Consuming is TikTok and LinkedIn for me, so I can kind of see what's going on in the industry, and also what's happening in some of the world and some culture and some other stuff. And I just kept catching myself like the first week I was here, just being super frustrated that I couldn't get as much done. I was checking my phone every 5 seconds because one notification would pop up here, one notification would pop up there, and then realizing like, oh my gosh, I'm letting this run how I'm operating day to day. And it's not gonna lie, it's selfishly it's a dopamine, right? Or it's serotonin or whatever
it's dopamine.
Dopamine.
Yeah. Like a slot machine getting
100%. So I think realizing that and deleting social media off my phone, only allowing myself to do on the weekends now, checking LinkedIn on my computer in the morning as a part after I read a book, like doing certain things have been such a huge clarity help.
And you can own all that, right?
Yeah.
Like, no one else had to do anything. That was all in your power. And that is, that's
well, it's just thing. And I wanted to I only use that and say that as an example because I want to ask you, like, for you, I'm sure there's got to have been some moments with, being a founder, because going into your story, for everyone who's listening for the first time now and getting to meet Andrew McConnell, go back and listen to the first episode and hear the different, pivots and entrepreneur journeys you've been through, from Rented Capital to now this, and, rented.com and creating art and everything. So for you, give me an example. What kind of, did you have a specific time or, frame in mind, and that you were just realizing you had, some mind space being rented, no pun intended with the name of the company, but being rented, that, was something that you changed for yourself?
Yeah, 100%. So, I mean, one that immediately resonates is this idea of don't suffer the same thing more than once, right? And so often you can pre-suffer. You worry about, oh my God, this thing that might happen, and maybe it happens and you suffer through that, or maybe it doesn't, but you suffered that whole time leading up to it. And either way, you didn't need to suffer the time leading up to it, or post-suffering of, oh my God, I can't believe this happened. And just being hit with it all over. And so just realizing, hey, the thing that happened, one, we can decide if it's good or bad. We can put that label on it ourselves, but separately, keep it to that one event. It doesn't need to happen before. It doesn't need to happen ever. Keep it to that one event. And so there've been multiple times on the journey you talk about the different companies, Vacation Futures, Running Capital, Running.com, where I wouldn't sleep for weeks, and I'm a zombie, and I'm not there for my daughter, and I'm just so dreading what might happen, right? COVID, right at that beginning when we're cutting all our salaries, like, hey, can we ever pay people again? Like, what's it going to look like? It's certainly one of those times. And realizing you don't need to suffer more than once. Like, if the bad thing's going to happen, it's going to happen. But here, what can I control? I can't control the virus. I can't control what the government does in opening markets. What I can control is if and how I deliver today for my clients. So what can we do today that would work for our clients? And that's an exact example of one of those times that going back to as I'm dreading, saying, wait a minute, I'm suffering more than once. This thing has not come yet. I do not need to do this. Let me work back through it.
Yeah.
And that's one. Separately, to help prevent even getting to that level of dread, preparing for the worst ahead of time, right? Just nothing's ever been less painful because you didn't prepare for it. So just knowing not to suffer is different than just putting your head in the sand like an ostrich. You can still work through, okay, what can go wrong here, right? And this is my friend who's a Navy SEAL, like talking about how they prepare, like what are the exercises you do? How do you do it? And his point is the most difficult part for a brain is uncertainty. And by definition, everything a SEAL's doing is uncertain, right? Like, you're thrown in these environments. And so you have to train for everything that you can control to take that off the table, so that 100% of your mind is there to adapt and react in the prefrontal cortex for the uncertain environment. So limit as much of the uncertainty as you possibly can on the front end through your preparation. And so I don't know, I can keep going like this for a long time, but there's been a bunch, I guess, is the point.
No, that's good. And it's just good because I think, for the last 2 years, I think the mental stress has been higher than probably ever for a lot of people, for society in general, for the world. And so, like, going into, these things, I think is super important. And that was a big lesson for a lot of people in my demographic and older demographics and coming up generations that are, maybe, just graduating high school and have this whole expectation put on them that they have to go do this, do that, do this, do that, when yet that's not what they really are excited about doing or living their life. And so I guess in the sense of suffering twice, happens so often. And so I more or less like to cover that in the founder's perspective, because, creating a company, whether it's super small or super big, or if you go unicorn status, there's this million miles a minute type of details flying at you, processing, going in, going out, decisions being made, unknown, on the outcome. And so going into kind of what you're covering in your book, it's just super applicable for the audience and for just even selfishly, like, this podcast is for me to learn a lot along the way with other people, hopefully finding this valuable. And so getting to understand things you could do better, how can you not suffer twice, and just getting to be relatable on a level with other founders in our space specifically is super important. So when does it come out? That's what I want to know.
June 14th is the drop date. Certainly organizing pre-order. So any managers on the call that want to do kind of bulk, for happy to kind of set up, could do signed copies for guests or for your owners. If you want to do something special, reach out. Happy to do any kind of package or fun thing around that. But you'll officially get the book June 14th, but no reason to hold off. You can, besides Rennet.com, you can find more about me in the book at my first name is Michael, at McConnell.com. And that has information there as well.
Awesome. Well, that's really cool. Another Michael. I did not know that. Doesn't say, man, I know a lot of Michaels and a lot of Andrews, and you got the best of both worlds right there.
Yeah, I went to some friends locally. We were going to lunch on a Sunday, and it was three Michaels and me. And I was like, yeah, but my first name's also Michael.
Yeah.
It's like this just a super common name.
That's so cool. Well, I'm excited. Just again, before we even wrap up the episode, for anyone in the audience to understand what are you guys doing? Now I think within rented and what you guys built with art. What's some stuff that's coming up in the future? I know we got a lot of events and conferences coming up this year, but for you guys as a team, what's happening and what's in the pipeline?
Yeah, the biggest thing I've been and the whole team's been working on is trying to see what takes up time for a revenue manager. So
Mhm.
not everybody does revenue management. They may just turn on the tool and then set it and forget it. But a lot of people, this is a full-time job. They take it seriously. They're doing revenue management. They're keeping an eye on it.
Mhm.
And so really understanding the things that they do and take up their time day to day, and then saying, okay, how do we take more of that off your plate to allow
Mhm.
you to spend more and more time on the real critical and strategic thinking that a revenue manager needs to have. And so the first thing right now is an alert system of saying, hey, here are the top 10 things I'm checking and I'm concerned about each day when I'm logging in, each week when I'm logging in. They're like, great, okay, let's set auto alerts to do all these things. Now, the next phase on that is, okay, when you see these alerts, what are the kinds of things you're doing? And can we then set up it to automatically do that, right? And so it's constantly finding ways to take more and more work off of a person's plate. Anything that can and should be automated, to take and automate it, and then allow that individual to really do only what that individual can do.
That's really good. It kind of reminds me of a conversation I've been having with a couple of friends and partners in the space is more of a balanced hospitality, right? Like I think the short-term rental segment, and you could probably attest to this too, compared to the hotel world, is so innovation or not innovation, innovative with technology, right? Like we have a tech and software or a product for almost everything now.
Mm.
Maybe not everything, but we're getting pretty damn close. And the adoption of it is incredible. The industry is so willing to try new things and do trials and demos, and we have rented. This episode won't go out on the 23rd, but rent responsibly is doing demo day for a lot of
Right.
these products and stuff. So like getting to see the high amount of tech, what do you call it, high tech, low touch type services is really incredible. But I think there's like this balance, right? Like you can do too much tech where you automate too much and you lose that human touch.
Yeah, I mean, and I think where we started, the client that we were so excited about did 6x, and
Mhm.
part of that was again taking the things that could be automated
Yes.
and pulling those off so that that manager said, look, all this extra money that I'm making, I can now deploy to owner marketing. All
Yes.
this time that I used to spend having to do this manually, I can go put in to owner conversations and owner uh, marketing and sales. And the result is I have 3x the number of homes that I manage, all while doubling the revenue. And so it's not saying pull the human out. It's
100%.
saying what are the things that a human, and this particular human, is uniquely qualified for,
Hmm.
and spending far more time there. It's in my own day job, I try to encourage anybody to do this. Really think about your life and your skill set in this 2x2 of what am I terrible at, what am I great at, what do I hate doing, what do I love doing. And the more of your life you can spend doing things you're great at and you love doing, you're going to have a more fulfilling, more rewarding life. And the more things that you can say, okay, what does not need to get done on these other buckets at all? To just
Hmm.
nobody, you don't need to automate it. Anyway, like the first thing is what can just get subtracted.
Yeah.
Then it's okay, what can get automated? What's just kind of admin repeatable tasks? Let's automate that. And then it's okay, are there better people to do this than me? And just constantly revisiting that and seeing that's how you build a better business. That's how you build a better life.
Yeah, 100%. And not to spoil it for any of the listeners, we actually talked about that on the first episode in 2020. So that's actually incredible. That is still a through and through situation. The 2x2 it's a great model to look at. And again, going back into 2020 with COVID, that a lot of people realized they were doing something that they were maybe good at, but hated doing, or
Mhm.
they sucked at doing and hated doing it either way. And
Yeah.
so, getting out of that, those two bottom boxes there, it's super important. And as we all seen this last year's been a big shift for a lot of people. So
Yeah.
it's pretty cool. Well, Andrew, I just want to say thank you so much for being on the show. It's super cool. It means a lot to me. So obviously, as anyone who's listened, that our conversations go very far. Just want to say thank you for being on the show again.
It's my pleasure. Every single time we catch up, it's absolute joy. And yeah, let's do it again in person soon.
Yes.
I would very much appreciate that.
Awesome. Well, you heard it here first, Slick Talkers. Make sure you check out everything in the show notes and you like and subscribe to everything Rented. And go ahead and see you guys again next week. Thank you so much for listening, and thank you to our show partners for making Slick Talk, the hospitality podcast, possible. We hope you enjoyed the show, and we would love to connect with you outside of the podcast. So you can follow us on all of our social media channels for daily hospitality content, or find us on slicktalkthepodcast.com. And don't forget to rate, review, and subscribe so you never miss an episode. I'm your host, Will Slickers, and we will see you guys all again next week.